You know, I have to admit, it'll surprise a lot of people to know that I was late to the therapy thing. I know I always talked about therapy as something important that everybody should do, and yet it took me a long time to do it myself for a variety of reasons. Sometimes not wanting to feel judged, sometimes not having the time, sometimes not being able to make the commute, whatever reason, right? I made up too many excuses until I finally bit the bullet and did it. So today, let's talk about therapy. Let's talk about anxiety. Let's talk about depression. And let's talk to somebody who knows it from the patient perspective and from the perspective of a therapist. Stick around. My guest today has been a patient, and he is a psychotherapist. He's had quite the history, from running to climbing, and in more ways than one. Please welcome Sim Chabra. Hello.
Hi, Warren.
It's great to see you. It's
Thanks
great to see you. Full disclosure, we've known each other a while now, and you know, when we met, I said that I was new to therapy, that at the time that we had met, I had only been doing it for a few years after encouraging people for the longest time, right? But once I got past that hurdle, once I got past the hump, and everyone has their own hump or hurdle, right? Once I got past that, I was amazed by, you know, how much it has helped me. And I know you've heard that a lot as a therapist, right? But you've also gone through that kind of experience yourself.
Yes, I have. Yeah, and it's been quite the experience to, so to speak, cross over and be able to now provide the type of care that I also understand, like you just brought up. You know, when we start, these are mountains to climb, mm-hmm. and then you just need the right support and the right guidance.
You say mountains to climb, and that's such a great analogy, because I've always said my own career, I try to explain to people, it sometimes feels like a mountain, and I keep reaching what I think is the top, but it's not. It's just the camp to the next phase, and then the next phase. I've never climbed mountains, full disclosure, but you know, that's how I've always described my career. But you know that feeling as a climber, like as an actual mountain climber.
Yeah, so I had an opportunity to actually climb Mount Kilimanjaro.
Better you than me.
It's actually a lot more fun than they set out to. It's actually
yeah, but I'm not good with stairs. I'm not going to be good with mountains. I know that much.
Well, we could have that chat later. We can create a real mountain for you to climb. Oh. So, when I look at that, so to give you a little synopsis, I had an opportunity to go hike Kilimanjaro, and I had this vision of reaching summit, and summit's about at 19,000 feet. And at about 17,000 feet, I experienced altitude sickness, and I had to abort and come back down to base. But the other members of my group managed to go and summit at 19,000. And one of the lessons that I learned on the mountain is that sometimes we set ourselves up for a goal or a vision, and when we don't achieve it, it's how do you process that disappointment? But at the same time, how do you celebrate someone else's success?
Well, because you had to celebrate the team's success while you didn't make it. Yeah. And I have to imagine that you're not just talking about accepting failure or accepting drawbacks. Like going into it, nobody thinks they're going to place last in the Olympics, right? And no one thinks that they're going to get altitude sickness. Like I can't even imagine. I mean, I'm sure, of course, climbers learn about altitude sickness, but you prepare and you think, it's not going to be me, it's not going to be me. And then how do you deal with it when it is?
It's a psychological shift because it's one of the most difficult decisions any climber makes. And it's that realization of, do I endanger myself, or do I acknowledge and accept that this is not my time? And when you're on the mountain teaches you a lot. And one of the guides, they said, the mountain chooses. And these little phrases sound profound when you're on.
Yeah, they have a spiritual kind of people of the earth quality to them.
But when you're actually experiencing it, and to me, when I go into therapy, and it's the same tie-in with the patient and now as a practitioner, the lesson that I bring into session is that we celebrate both. We celebrate our successes, but we also celebrate our disappointments. And it's more valor if you are able to proudly celebrate your disappointment with those around you that are supporting you in that moment. And that, to me, is what therapy and sessions are about. It's about being there for the client in their lowest or enjoying them at their highest.
Okay, so for me, I think it's always been, I celebrate my failures with self-deprecation, self-deprecating humor.
Yeah.
Is that a response? Is that a response to, my setbacks or whatever, that self-deprecating humor tends to be my way of coping for such things?
It can be.
Yeah.
And when you look at, say, the principles of CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, right? They have this notion of thoughts, right? Our thoughts create our feelings create our behaviors create our emotions, and you kind of have this circular motion, right? Each feed into the other. Now, when you talk about self-deprecating humor, it's a good way to diffuse the feeling, to soften the harshness, right? But it's a very thin line, because if you make that your belief, that I'm not capable, because it's a very thin, slippery slope, where, for example, being in showbiz, you could say, I have the face for radio.
Yeah,
and
sure.
And
we all know that I have the face for television, of course, though.
And the beauty of that is that can help ease some of the stress and anxiety that you're feeling inside.
Sure.
But if you have that as your core belief, that I only have face for radio, and you have an opportunity now to go to try something for TV, now that has become a weighted anchor rather than a diffuser. So you have to be very, very cautious on how you're placing that humor.
You said slippery slope, and this is a term I often like when I'm thinking about my own life, my own mental health or whatever, because the way I came to finally getting therapy was the confusion of feeling like I either had extreme anxiety or extreme depression. And I didn't know which one I had, or if it was even both. And I wound up finding out, I wound up getting diagnosed later than a lot of people with ADHD. And I know that a lot of people see that as like a catch-all thing that everyone's saying they have ADHD nowadays, but not everyone is actually getting diagnosed with it, right? And, truth is, it was always a little of both. There was always this anxiety, and most of it, career-driven, right? And the ADHD and not being able to focus and get enough things done eventually led to these feelings of depression, right? And then all I would do was blame myself, and it would go in this vicious circle, right? What kind of, as a therapist, what do you do with someone like me who comes in and they're like, I think I've got anxiety, but I also think I'm depressed, and I'm all over the place, and I just gotta stop this. I need help, any kind of help.
Do you mind telling me a little bit, like an experience or something where you're feeling this push-pull?
Well, I think every media person, entertainer, not every, but many or most entertainers and public professionals or showbiz people, what have you. Let me start again there. That I think that a lot of people who work in media, entertainment, and show business, we have a push-pull between our personal life and our private life, our desire to live a life like other people and have a family, while at the same time, it's hard to meet the challenges in your personal life because your professional life is so very demanding. but not just demanding, it's demanding in a way that other industries often aren't, because the hours are difficult, sporadic. The work can be feast or famine. It can be weekend night, overnight work. It can be work that suddenly involves travel for weeks at a time, or sometimes you're home for months at a time. It's the uncertainty of it all can be a lot to ask of people in your life. That includes friends. It's often hard for me to have close friends because I'm not around, right? I'm buried in what I do for a living, right?
And thank you for sharing that. So a lot of, especially like, I'm going to work with the example you gave me, but it's common to have this push-pull. And the reason why I say that is because we all have a inner identity. And then we have external expectations that we interact with the world with. I tend to reference pop culture a lot for myself. So you have self-deprecating humor. I use pop culture in my brain to understand things.
Well, I mean, I prefer that to, say, you just throwing out medical jargon at me, to be honest with you. That's the other reason I think a lot of people get turned off by therapy, is they're afraid they're going to be talking to a scientist. They're afraid they're going to be talking to a clinician. You're sitting in, whether it's a doctor or not, you have that feeling. It's going to feel sterile.
Yeah.
Right? So the pop culture references is a good thing. It makes it feel conversational.
Thank you. So when you talk about this duality, or this two, you have this internal part of who you are and your identity, and then you have this external expectations, long road trips, family time, the splits of energy. And the reference that I use in sessions is Headquarters and Inside Out. And what it is to set up the scene.
I like that.
It's basically, it's a young girl that moves to a new town, and the whole movie is about her emotions, inner emotions, and how she processes it and how she interacts with the world. And I feel a lot of us are that. It's just we feel uncomfortable and unsupported in expressing that. Or we kind of show it in bursts to people, right? So in terms of coming back to this feeling of anxiety and depression, you could be, both and feel that swing. And the analogy that I give in session is either a person feels like a pendulum, where they're just going from one to the other with no control, and that's emotionally draining, or they're on a teeter-totter, where they're going up and down, and that's emotionally draining, physically, right? So what happens here is, so I'll give you an example.
What if the teeter-totter also feels like it's spinning around, and people have inflatable bats that they're just like kind of hitting you with?
Right, and that's your coping response.
Okay.
Right, because instinctively, you're always trying to reach equilibrium. You're always trying to be middle. You're trying to be steady. That singular motion has many different words to it, right? Finding your zen, being at balance, blah, blah, blah.
Hunky-dory.
Right? So those are common automatic responses. It's kind of like, stabilizing yourself when you're walking. Like it's ingrained for the brain to find a middle. So now, putting the coping response aside, because that's the therapy part of things, but coming back to the actual experience of it. So one of the things that I've noticed over time in sessions is that people always want to articulate that. And one of the things that I do for them is I create the space for expressions. Something similar to what we're trying to do here, where, I wanted to kind of understand what is it that you truly battle with, right? And once they recognize, hey, I'm more of a pendulum, or I'm more of a teeter-totter, what that allows me to then do is go to understand them is that, do they have more of physical experiences, or do they have more mental experiences? When you have mental experiences, everything feels out of hand. Everything's spinning. Everything's moving quickly. You can't capture one thought to the other, right? And it literally feels like a monkey mind. And I'm sure, have you heard of the monkey mind?
No.
Okay. So it's a Buddhist philosophy.
The monkey mind?
The monkey mind,
Okay.
where your thoughts are jumping one from place to another, and it
Right.
gets overwhelming. And that is something that we all have a struggle with, because we're processing multiple input thoughts at any given time. But it's not something that cannot be managed or controlled,
Yeah.
right? Because once you understand what it is, like once now, having you express that, hey, I feel like a teeter-totter with a baseball bat.
Yeah.
Right? To me, the way it translated is, hey man, I go up and down, and my coping response is, let me whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
Right? So I understand that imagery that you've just created, because you're giving me a glimpse into the complexity of your life. And you're trying to narrate that into 4 sentences and hope that, hey, I hope that's sufficient enough for him to capture what it is that I feel at any given time. And what I'm really wanting from him, or my therapist for that matter, is a way to navigate that. Because as a patient, now as a practitioner, my true belief is that, and it kind of goes back to why the clinic name became Horizon Within, is because we have a grasp of what it is that we want. We may not have an ability to structure it, or we may have certain experiences that we don't quite understand fully, right? And they could be, adverse experiences, non-understanding life changes, and the spectrum's infinite there.
What kind of life changes?
It could be, so for instance, prior to COVID, I was in hospitality for 20 years.
Right.
And then, everybody was in self-reflection, and I pivoted to going back, getting my master's, and actually going true to my calling, which is being of service to people, applying my analytical skills, but in a more meaningful way.
Right.
Right? So again, coming back to once you kind of grasp that and you have an understanding of it, right, then the journey makes sense. And then people kind of go, okay, I know what I need to do. I know how to frame it. And then I tend to then become a little bit more of a support than someone that's interfering. But some people kind of need to kind of dig in a bit deeper or whatever. So at the end of the day, the idea of conceptualizing what a person's going through, that is something that I feel is the most important thing. Because people have their way of explaining what they are going through or what they want. And then as a therapist, my task is to listen intently, pick up the right words, and kind of go, okay, they're framing it this way, rather than psychoanalyzing them, saying, why are they saying it this way? So I look at how you're framing your story rather than why you're saying it a certain way.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's comforting for someone like me because I do have ADHD. We talk about ADHD, and I do have ADHD, and it's easy to joke about. It's an easy thing to be like, ADHD means, hey, look over there, and sure, there's a degree of that with people, but for me, the reason that my ADHD can then also lead to issues with anxiety or then depression is because there's often this feeling, people with ADHD often feel like there's not enough time, that everything is rushed, that there's not enough time. Time is running out, there's not enough time, but everything needs to be done and needs to be done quickly.
Right.
And then the realization that you can't do that, but you're going to try. And so that's where the anxiety comes in. And then eventually it kicks in that you can't, and the depression comes in with this feeling like I didn't get anything done. I didn't get any of it done. And so much of it just goes back to if I was able to really harness that focus initially.
Right.
Realistically harness that focus initially.
So when I'm working with ADHD clients, right, one of the things that we try to address immediately is we take the label and the diagnosis and we just park it to the side. Because at the end of the day, it's a core function, right? What you're saying is, I have 8 things on the plate. I have an attention span for -2, right? And I only have 4 hours to do it in. That's fair, right? Because now, instead of spending a moment and saying what I'm not capable of, we take a step back and go, okay, how would we try to reorganize it, without putting pressure on yourself, right? And then, so say, for example, you brought up a very good thing about, you may be on a shoot and you're gone for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
right? Well, your routine's disrupted. So if your routine's disrupted, well, everything's going to just cascade accordingly.
Right.
So through conversation now, it's truly not ADHD. It just happened that my routine gets disrupted. And because when I'm at home, I'm able to predict my routine, which means I have function, which means I have productivity. And now I'm measuring that. And now what's happened is actually what it is, my routine changed.
Okay.
So just see through this conversation,
Sure.
I was able to say, yes, it is a factor. We didn't discount it. But we just shook the tree a little bit more, and we actually found the true fruit, and which is change of routine. So now session turns into and goes, okay, which of your routines are the most critical for you to have function? And you could say to me then, hey, you know what? I need 15 minutes in the morning. Fine. Then we make sure that in your shoots, you get that 15 minutes in the morning. Because now your routine is what you use your baseline with. It's where now you don't need the baseball bat.
Right.
Right? Because now the teeter-totter isn't doing this, it's doing this. But you've already measured for that because you've said, hey, listen, my environment's going to be changing. My routine's going to be constant. That's the disruptor with ADHD. It's because now it becomes many more things to process. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It does make sense because, again, the thing that has always escaped me is being able to establish routine.
Right.
Like it's the unpredictability of my career, and since I've always identified with my career,
Right.
it's always made it hard for me to have a routine. My life has been unpredictable because I've made my career my life.
Right.
Right? Now, one of the things that kept me from therapy for so long was there was always this kind of fear of being judged. I was going through a period, all the times in my life when I probably would have benefited most from therapy were times when I was struggling with self-loathing. And that's really common for people who are in media, show business, entertainment. I can't speak for everybody, but I know it's not uncommon in my field, right? But regardless, even if I'm the only person to ever experience this, that was something that's always kept me from therapy, was I was going to go in, sit down, and confess my inner thoughts and walk out going, I feel like I just incriminated myself to somebody.
And that is very true of...
And I don't mean of a crime, but just I'm afraid I'm going to go in and tell all my inner dark secrets, and I've incriminated my person to somebody.
Right. Well, because it's, in a sense, it's an invasion of privacy.
Yeah.
Whether it's consented to or not, right? And I respect that with the person. So I want to answer one point that you brought up, and then I'm going to add on to what you just said. So in terms of routine, one thing that I tell my clients, and I use for myself, we have two constants. You sleep at night and you wake up. Those are your constants.
Right.
You have to sleep at some point and you have to wake up at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Build around there. So if you sleep, have one single consistent thing you do. Okay?
Okay.
So, and it's got to be towards the end, okay? And then you bring awareness to that.
Well, what's the one consistent thing?
It could be as simple as the minute my head hits my pillow, full stop.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
And that becomes a trigger point. Because now what you've done is you've created a marker. Yeah, you could still have running thoughts after. Yeah, you could be staring into the ceiling. Those are all X values, but that stays constant. The minute my head hits the pillow. That's your marker for going to bed.
Right.
Now what that does is it allows us to then go, hey, what do I need to do before my head hits the pillow? What do I need to do after my head hits the pillow? Not what do I need to do to fall asleep? What do I do till my head hits the pillow?
Nothing.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying is it's
I'm
given
kidding.
us something to work with,
Sure.
right? That's the trick of therapy. And that's how I tend to come into sessions with, or like when people give me, a struggle that they're working with.
Right.
Because they want to better themselves towards something.
Right.
Now, on the flip side, we all have to wake up, right? So now we find a singular point there.
Well, in theory, we all have to wake up, God willing.
Right. If you don't, problem solved,
Yeah.
right?
Touche.
Yeah, as long as... So
It's morbid, but it works.
now you create a pivot point there.
Right.
Now, you don't have to say the minute I open my eyes,
Yeah.
because your brain hasn't registered.
Right.
So you give the brain the opportunity to wake up. So you could delay that,
The minute the minute my feet hit the floor.
but you're telling your brain to wake up. Why should the brain come to work before everybody else does?
Right.
So now we kind of go, okay, what does your morning look like? And you could be like, you know what? I have morning brain. And my brain doesn't want to come online till, then I go, fine, till I have my first sip of coffee. Well, there you go. There's your marker. So up until before your first sip of coffee, what do we need to do so that minute you get to that coffee, you appreciate that first sip? And all we're doing is markers. We're not solving the problem. We're creating bookends. And now we start looking at it in session going, okay, where do you feel you would benefit the most? Because it's your horizon line. I'm just the guide. And then you go, you know what, minute my head hits on the pillow, I have running thoughts. Okay, we know what to do here. Or even after I have my first sip of coffee, I'm not awake. We know what to do. You see how we've compartmentalized it? Because every day is different, right? We may have crests and peaks and valleys and ups and downs and all of that. But if you have two bookends, now you could have had a great day, head hit the pillow, there's your marker. You had a bad day, the marker's still there. That's the constant. Because what happens is, and especially with ADHD clients, the minute the marker moves, the whole thing collapses. And that's where they get frustrated. So by creating these that are constant, because they have to happen, what it does is then it allows you to then find your calibration. Because now we're working outwards. So you could now start expanding this way, and you could start expanding this way. And you're coming to the same point. So even if you go after my first sip of coffee, all right, I get up at 10 a.m., who cares? But the minute you had your first sip of coffee, it's cue on, which means now everything is accounted for. Right?
Right.
Or you could be like, minute my head hits a pillow, I could have 80 other things, okay? But that was my cue, right? So I've come up, I love acronyms. I have a thing for acronyms. So I'm going to share something with you today. Use it at will, and as well as the audience. I call it TWCW. Okay?
TWCW.
TWCW. The world can wait. It's the best mantra.
The world can wait.
The world can wait. And it's simple. Right? The world can wait.
Yeah.
And you don't have to like...
God knows it's been waiting long enough already.
TWCW.
TWCW.
So all my clients get that little bonus thing. And that's how you start building
Nice,
it.
I like
Because
that.
minute your head hit the pillow, thoughts are running, TWCW. You're not counting sheeps. You're doing nothing. You're just telling your brain, the world can wait.
Okay, and then you say that like you're doing nothing, the world can wait. What I like about that is the hardest part for me my entire life, not just as someone with ADHD, but I know there's plenty of people out there that are like this who don't have ADHD, but it's always been that feeling of the weight of the world, that the world can't wait. That's been a thing to overcome, this idea that everything is the weight of the world is on your shoulders. There's so much stress, there's so much pressure or whatever. The hardest thing for me has always been just to relax. And more when I'm meeting people and talking about therapy and whatnot, they don't say, oh, I have ADHD and I can't turn my brain off. They say, I can't relax.
Right. And that's a fair statement, because it's all of us. right?
Yeah.
That's just the name of the game.
Right.
So,
So for someone who can't relax, let's say that's their thing, this kind of, TWCW, this kind of philosophy is really great. It's helpful because maybe it's just that little reminder you have to give yourself every day, right? Just especially in those times when you're trying to sleep. Before I was diagnosed with ADHD, I went through all this sleep training and stuff in order to sleep better at night. And now I sleep really well at night because I learned all of that, little things. Like I only use my bed for sleep and sex. I don't use it for, you're learning something about me, sorry. But I don't use it for anything. I don't read in bed. I don't watch TV in bed.
Right.
I don't sit on the phone and talk in bed. I've identified the bed as something that's for sleep.
Yep. And now, so the TWCW comes from Hakuna Matata.
Hakuna Matata? No worries.
Exactly. But because of copyright,
I don't think the language is copyright.
Yes, but then I have to reference where it comes from, right?
Okay,
and
so
TWCW sounds better.
All right.
Right?
Because TWCW, it is.
Right, it's got a catch to it.
It is, absolutely it
right.
does.
And it's the
Absolutely.
same thing. See, look, we are brought up, and it's not a fault of society. And I try my best in sessions to refrain from finger pointing.
Right.
Because it brings zero value.
Well, it's exhausting. I stopped trying to blame everyone a long time ago just due to the fact that it didn't get me anywhere.
Right.
And I found that I had too many targets.
It's the same thing with like if when you come and ask me, you go, oh, I have ADHD, and I go, well, you have diminished executive function. Well, that's zero value to you. Yeah. But if I go, hey, what goes on? And you go, look, I got 10 things to do. I have an attention span of -2, and I have 6 hours to do it. All right. Well, let's have the conversation. We look at routines. We look at discipline. We look at elements that you already have, and go, okay, what works? What doesn't work? What would you like to strengthen? It changes the parameters. So that's why I tend to say we live in that society. So I'll give you a very, one of the things they teach you when you're learning to distance run, right? Set your pace. So when you're training for like half marathons and marathons, right? And you're out there pounding the pavement, training and trying to get your distance and your legs ready for the race, right? Everybody on race morning, right? I'm not talking about your pro runners that are on top of the pack and they're only running with 6, right? When you're training, you're only running by yourself. On race day, you're running with thousands of people. You automatically sink into the pace of the group. And you have to then start slowing yourself down and finding your own rhythm and your own pace. That's life. I'm not encouraging and saying, hey, go run a full marathon. I've done that.
Yeah.
Right?
Better you than me.
But those are those little life lessons that you can pull from your experiences. But we all have it in different ways. We all have our own unique experiences. Like when you're learning to memorize a script, it requires a bandwidth of brain that an average person doesn't have. Because you got to personify a person and a character and a feeling that a random stranger has to extract from 4 sentences that you read. That's skill. So for me, it's honoring that and then working with that. Because what you're saying is, yeah, but I can't do these things. Yeah, but I can't do that thing. Right? You heard the phrase, it takes a village, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So a while back, 2 friends of mine, Bryce and Zaya, they concocted an idea, sitting in a pub, of bringing awareness to child poverty in Canada.
Right.
And their idea was, why don't we run coast to coast?
Great.
So from Newfoundland to Vancouver, British Columbia, they chose to run across the country. And
Very impressive.
They got it was phenomenal. And they got, they went to their friends, family, and got support. And I had the privilege to run with them from Montreal to Kingston, and then rejoin them out in Abbotsford and run into Vancouver. But the run, we were hosted by families along the way. And they would open their doors, shower us with generosity, food, care, conversations. And it was equally joyful for them as it was for us.
Wow.
Right? And, one of the things they would always bring up is, well, we couldn't do what you do. And our answer back to them is, we couldn't do what we're doing if it weren't you doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's that exchange. It's the exchange that makes us whole, not our differences or what we can't do and what the other person's doing. You see, that's what it means by it takes a village. So when you're in session, or when we're in session, I highlight that. It's the resources that we have. And how do we use them? Because we all have something we can exchange with.
So what I'm learning here is that if it's a good cause, strangers will let you stay at their house and eat their food. See, this is why therapy is so great.
Yeah.
You learn these things when talking to a therapist.
Yeah.
But I think that's amazing. It's a great story of community, and see, that's why I sought out therapy as well. Because as you know, when we met, I said, that's why I thought out, that's one reason I sought out therapy as well. Because like when you and I met, I had said that I had lost my sense of community. COVID had happened. I had withdrawn from everyone for a couple of years and gotten divorced and all this stuff, and then suddenly felt like I didn't have a community. I didn't have a circle of friends. I didn't even have people that I used to work with that I would hang out with or anything like that. And on top of that, I'd always treated my career as a solo thing. I buried myself in my career feeling it was all me all the time, that I didn't even feel I had a support network or whatever. And I needed that. I needed some kind of non-judgmental support, sounding board, that helps. Not just with the routine, like we've talked about, the scheduling helps the ADHD, but having a non-judgmental sounding board to finally have that, and to make me feel like I wasn't always alone.
Yeah, to be heard.
Yeah.
To be heard.
To be heard.
That is half of therapy. Half of therapy is being heard. And that's what I feel is the core of therapy. I mean, if you look at it, I'm registered with the College of Registered Psychotherapists of Ontario. Mm-hmm. And, I'm qualifying, and I am working towards fulfilling my hours, mm-hmm. and with the help of Scared Psychology out in Fort Erie. And, one of the things that I've learned over the last 2 years of being a psychotherapist is that it's more about being heard. And what does it mean to be heard? What does it mean to be understood? It means you're picking up on their style of the story rather than the content of the story. Because we all have a way of shaping our stories. We all have a way of blocking certain elements, And to me, one of the biggest things that I've learned is that I'm only getting a snippet of the picture. And I make sure that I keep that in front and focus. So, I've learned a lot about you in the last 20 minutes, if you think about it. Sure. You know what I mean? But you've also been able to express, I've been able to reflect back where you're like, yeah, I didn't have to say that to him, but he understood it. That's therapy. More than the psychoeducation part of it, that benefits. That's helpful because it allows you to structure, right? But it serves its purpose. And so I have an undergrad in economics. So for me, it's always about numbers. I got to quantify things because that's one way I grasp things, right? And to me, a good therapist is someone that provides about no more than, depending on the client's severity, okay? So no more than 40% psychoeducation, right? Mm-hmm. And a really good therapist mm-hmm. will provide about 25% psychoeducation.
Okay.
The rest is the client's space.
Okay.
And
so only a little bit of his technical mumbo jumbo.
Because they need that knowledge. They need that structure afterwards, right? Coming back to scheduling. Well, now we've identified 3 things. That's psychoeducation.
Right.
right? That's CBT at work. That's cognitive restructuring without me being technical about it. You're more recipient of it. You know, if I use pop culture and I say headquarters and inside out, you automatically understand that there is an inner dialogue that you have with yourself. And then you have your world experiences and how you narrate the story to the world. And because now you can frame it, guess what happens? Our communication between each other amplifies because there's a mutual understanding and you're being heard. That is therapy.
Sim Chabra is the therapist. His practice is called Horizon Within. Sim, do you feel heard?
Yes.
Excellent. Before we go, tell me real quick about GROW.
So one of the things that you come across a lot is SMART goals. Specific, measurable, achievable, attainable, so on and so forth. So what I do is I take it one step further, okay? And I go, okay, what does that mean? What does that goal mean? And how would you go home and have a way of saying, is it helping? Is it not? So what am I gaining? What am I getting out of it? Whether it's in session, whether it's in my goal. So the G is gain, right? Then what do I have that I can use? Those are my resources, right? What challenges I might face? So for you, you may say, you know what, I want to have a consistent routine, but you just got signed on for, a 3-series movie that's going to film over 5 years.
Right.
Well, you're committed.
Right.
Well, shoots happen all over the world, right? Well, now when we're in session, and you could be calling me up when you're on site in Australia, well, what's the obstacle? Time zone. So now we start acknowledging that, right? And then the last one is, this is a good saying, right? When the going gets tough, the tough get going.
Sure.
That's the willingness. So now what I like to do is I always like to shake the tree a little bit in session. So then when you leave session, you have something that's a little bit more solid. And this is what I've learned by being a patient, because once you leave a session, you still have to go into the world. So I try to give you tools that are feasible and possible while you're in the world, because that's the whole point. That's what Horizon Within is, right? To be able to take these tools and then go back in and go, okay, what's my compass? What is my true north? And then now you bring in your grow. How do I measure my gains? Even if it's the inches, it's my gains. Well, what do I have? What are my resources? It could be friends. It could be what you went through during COVID, right? You went into your resources, right? Which was yourself. Horizon Within, right? What were your obstacles? Well, we had a pandemic, but you also had certain other elements, right? And then what was your willingness? Your willingness was what made you stay persistent on what you wanted to achieve. Well, how are you going to achieve a goal? You have a horizon. Where's the horizon? It's within.
See, it wasn't even therapy and I feel better already. How do you feel?
I feel good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Really, it's just fascinating to me to listen to you talk about your method. I'm used to, when I talk to therapists, I'm used to talking about me and my problems. But it's really cool to listen to you talk about your technique and your methods and your routine.
Yeah.
So thanks for being here.
Thanks.
So the therapist is Sim Chabra. The practice is Horizon Within out of Port Credit, Ontario. But you can see patients online. You can see them pretty much Canada-wide.
Right. So I am licensed with the CRPO, which is the Ontario College for Psychotherapists. And I'm also registered with the CCPA, which is the Canadian Counselling and Psychotherapy Association. And that certification allows me to see clients in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and the territories.
There you have it. No matter where you get help, if you need it, seek it out. Seek help, seek someone to talk to, find a friend. And we'll see you next time.
We'll see you.